10 secret techniques to supercharge your brain power. Imagine waking up tomorrow with a mind that feels sharper, clearer, faster, as if someone unlocked a hidden switch inside your brain that you didn't even know existed. What would change for you? What decisions would suddenly feel easy? What goals would finally feel possible? The truth is, your brain is extraordinary, but most people only use a fraction of its real capacity. Not because they lack intelligence, but because no one ever taught them how to activate the deeper levels of cognitive power that are already there, waiting. Today, that changes. In this video, I'm going to show you 10 secret techniques that can supercharge your brain power and elevate your mind to the level of high achievers, innovators, and wealth creators who seem to think with effortless clarity. These aren't theories. These are timeless mental principles adapted for the modern seeker of self-knowledge, prosperity, abundance, and success. And once you learn how to use them, you won't see your mind or your future the same way again. Stay close. Something powerful is about to unfold. Topic 1. The decision that reprograms your brain and changes your destiny. There is a moment in every person's life when everything changes, but most people don't notice it when it happens. It isn't loud, it isn't dramatic. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or applause. It happens quietly, often in a single thought, in a single breath, in a single moment of clarity where a person finally decides who they are going to be from that day forward. That moment of decision, although invisible on the outside, creates a shockwave inside the brain. Neurochemistry shifts, neural pathways begin to reorganize. Your reticular activating system, the filter that shapes your perception of reality, instantly adjusts to a new identity. And in that instant, your brain stops trying to hold on to who you were and begins to build who you are becoming. It feels subtle at first, but it is one of the most powerful transformations a human being can experience. When you look at people who create extraordinary outcomes, entrepreneurs, innovators, leaders, wealth creators, many imagine they succeeded because they got lucky or because they had resources that others didn't have. But the real story begins much earlier, in an internal moment where they made a decision that didn't match their circumstances, yet completely matched their identity. Think of individuals like Elon Musk in the early days, before Tesla was winning any awards, before SpaceX had a single successful launch. Nothing around him validated the identity of a world-changing innovator. And yet, he chose it. He decided it. He stepped into it mentally long before the world caught up. Apple did the same. Before people believed in their vision, before anyone expected them to redefine entire industries, the decision had already been made internally. The identity came first. The results followed later. This phenomenon isn't exclusive to billionaires or industry titans. You've seen it in people around you. Someone struggles for years, repeating the same patterns, hitting the same emotional walls, feeling stuck in the same limitations. Then something shifts. It may be after a painful experience, an inspiring moment, a conversation, or even a quiet realization that they can no longer accept the life they've been living. And in that instant, their brain rewires itself around a new identity. They begin to show up differently. They speak with more conviction. They make decisions faster. They notice opportunities that were always there but completely invisible. Their energy changes, and their environment responds to that shift. Your brain is always asking a single question: who am I supposed to be consistent with? The mind seeks coherence. If your identity is shaped by fear, doubt, scarcity, or limitation, then your brain will continue to reinforce that reality. It will sabotage clarity. It will drown inspiration. It will manufacture hesitation, not because you aren't capable, but because your brain believes its job is to protect the version of you it thinks is real. But the moment you declare a new identity, one that aligns with clarity, abundance, success, intelligence, confidence, and creativity, your brain reorganizes its files, rewrites its patterns, and begins prioritizing thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that match this upgraded version of yourself. This is why some people feel exhausted, even when they haven't done anything. Indecision creates mental fragmentation. The mind splits itself into competing directions. Should I follow my intuition or my fear? Should I move forward or stay safe? Should I try or should I avoid risking failure? That fragmentation drains cognitive energy at an astonishing rate. But the instant you make a decision, truly make it, your mind becomes whole again. Energy that was previously wasted on doubt becomes available for creativity, imagination, problem-solving, and focus. Your brain stops spinning in circles and begins moving forward with purpose. Many people misunderstand decision. They think deciding means hoping something will happen or wishing for change. But real decision is an internal turning point. It's when you stop negotiating with your excuses. It's when you stop waiting for perfect timing. It's when you stop apologizing for wanting a bigger life. It's when you stop shrinking to match your fears and start expanding to match your potential. Real decision is identity level. It's not about wanting something. It's about becoming someone. Once your identity shifts, something remarkable happens. The world begins to reflect your new inner state. You start recognizing patterns that once confused you. You begin to trust your intuition more. You feel guided in ways that previously felt random. Your conversations change. Your environment changes. Even the opportunities that come into your life seem to shift, as if reality is reorganizing itself to support the person you are becoming. And this is not magic, although it feels magical. This is the brain doing what it's designed to do: align your perception with your identity. This first technique to supercharge your brain power is the foundation of all others, because without identity-level decision, the mind cannot sustain high performance. It will always default back to old patterns. But when you decide who you truly are, someone capable of clarity, intelligence, discipline, and prosperity, your brain adapts. It strengthens the neural circuits that support your success. It dissolves the patterns that kept you stuck. It upgrades your internal operating system. And from that point forward, everything becomes easier, clearer, lighter. Take a moment and feel this in your chest, in your breath, in your awareness. Your brain is waiting for you to decide. Not tomorrow, not in a week, now. Your future doesn't begin when circumstances change. Your future begins the second you declare who you choose to be. And once that declaration is real, your entire mind shifts into alignment. This is how destinies change. This is how ordinary people become unstoppable. This is how success begins, not with action, but with identity. And your identity is yours to choose. Topic 2. The power of extreme focus. Training your brain to think like a genius. If there is one ability that separates extraordinary thinkers from ordinary performers, it is the capacity for extreme focus. Focus is not simply paying attention. Focus is the energetic alignment of your mind toward a single direction with such intensity that all distractions become irrelevant. When focus deepens, the brain enters an elevated cognitive state where clarity increases, creativity expands, memory sharpens, and decision-making becomes effortlessly precise. This state is not reserved for prodigies or geniuses. It is a trainable mental ability, and once mastered, it becomes one of the greatest accelerators of intelligence, prosperity, and personal transformation. Modern life has conditioned the brain to respond to fragmentation. Notifications, constant noise, endless scrolling, multitasking, emotional overload. All of these weaken the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning, reasoning, discipline, and high-level thinking. Most people have trained their minds to be scattered without realizing it. They confuse stimulation with productivity. They confuse movement with progress. This scattered mental pattern is the enemy of genius-level thinking. It creates a fog that makes even simple decisions feel heavy. The brain becomes a battlefield of competing impulses, each trying to pull attention in a different direction. But when you look at individuals who achieved massive wealth and influence, you see an entirely different pattern. They protect their focus like treasure. Warren Buffett once said that intense focus, not intelligence, is the real reason behind his success. Jeff Bezos attributes his breakthroughs to deep thinking time, uninterrupted by noise. And think of Steve Jobs. His genius was not merely creativity. It was the capacity to eliminate what didn't matter so the essential could shine. Focus became a superpower that shaped entire industries. The mind becomes powerful the moment you learn to direct it. Focus is not something you wait to feel. It is something you choose to cultivate, like a muscle. And the more you strengthen it, the more your brain becomes capable of entering heightened states of clarity and innovation. When you train yourself to concentrate deeply on one idea, one goal, one intention, your brain reorganizes its neural networks around that command. It begins filtering out irrelevant information. It finds patterns faster. It builds associations that other people completely miss. What feels complicated to others begins to feel simple to you. What overwhelms others becomes manageable. What confuses others becomes obvious. This is why the wealthiest companies in the world operate with incredible precision. They are not trying to do everything. They focus on what matters. Look at Google. Its original success came from reducing complexity, not adding to it. One clean search bar, one core mission, one focused identity, and that focus created an empire. Apple did the same. Instead of designing thousands of products, they focused on a small number of exceptional ones. The concentrated intention behind each decision created clarity for the consumer and power for the brand. Focus isn't just mental, it is strategic, energetic, and deeply transformative. In your personal life, the power of extreme focus begins with a decision. The decision to stop letting your attention be hijacked by noise. Every time you choose to give your attention away to something meaningless, you are weakening the very muscle that creates success. But every time you choose to bring your mind back to your goal, your vision, your purpose, you are rewiring your brain for mastery. You're strengthening your neural pathways for discipline, intelligence, and prosperity. Your brain is incredibly responsive to repetition. If you train it to be distracted, distraction becomes automatic. But if you train it to remain present, focused, and intentional, your mind becomes a weapon. It becomes a tool for creation instead of a prisoner of external stimulation. The world begins to feel quieter, clearer, more organized. Ideas flow more easily. Solutions appear faster. You start operating on a frequency that most people never experience. There is a fascinating psychological principle known as the spotlight effect of attention. Whatever you focus on expands in your consciousness. If you focus on problems, your brain amplifies them. If you focus on solutions, your brain begins generating them. If you focus on success, your brain starts identifying opportunities. The mind does not judge, it obeys. It doesn't ask whether your focus serves you, it simply intensifies whatever you direct it toward. This is why successful people appear to manifest outcomes quickly. Their spotlight is consistently pointed toward possibility rather than fear. The moment you learn to hold focus for extended periods, something extraordinary begins to happen. You enter a cognitive zone where thoughts line up with clarity, emotions align with purpose, and your actions start feeling guided rather than forced. You stop wasting energy on the unnecessary. You stop losing time to mental clutter. You feel more present, more alive, more connected to your goals. You begin to think like someone who is destined for greatness because your brain finally has the internal environment it needs to operate at full power. Extreme focus also awakens a deeper dimension of your intelligence, intuitive intelligence. When your mind is quiet, your intuition becomes louder. When your thoughts are organized, your inner guidance becomes clearer. When your attention is stable, you can sense patterns and opportunities that were previously hidden in mental chaos. This is why many millionaires talk about gut feelings, silent clarity, or moments of knowing. These aren't mystical accidents. They are the natural byproduct of a focused mind. The true secret of brain power is not how much information you absorb, but how intentionally you direct the energy of your mind. A scattered mind cannot create wealth. A focused mind cannot help but create it. Because focus transforms the brain from a passive receiver of random thoughts into an active architect of reality. Imagine what your life would look like if you trained your brain to focus like this every day. Imagine how much time you would save, how much stress you would eliminate, how many ideas you would generate, how many doors would open simply because your mind stopped chasing noise and began communicating clearly with your goals. You would think differently. You would feel differently. You would behave differently, and the world would respond to you differently. This is the essence of extreme focus. It is not just a cognitive skill, it is a path to abundance, clarity, intelligence, and prosperity. When you master your focus, you master your mind, and when you master your mind, you master your life. Topic 3. Reprogramming your mind through repetition, the millionaire brain loop. If you truly want to supercharge your brain power, there is one psychological truth you must absorb. Your mind becomes whatever you repeat. Not what you occasionally think, not what you hope for, not what you dream about late at night. Your brain becomes what you tell it consistently, what you rehearse emotionally, and what you reinforce day after day through internal dialogue and conscious attention. Repetition is the architect of the mind. It is the hidden mechanism behind intelligence, confidence, creativity, and wealth creation. And yet, most people use repetition unconsciously to reinforce the very limitations they are trying to escape. The human brain is designed to automate whatever you do frequently, not because it is trying to limit you, but because it wants to conserve energy. Everything you repeat becomes easier, faster, and more effortless, whether that repetition is positive or negative. This is why someone who constantly repeats phrases like, "I can't," "I'm not smart enough," "I'm always overwhelmed," or "I never get ahead," eventually forms a subconscious identity around those beliefs. Their brain installs those thoughts as default settings, turning them into automated neural pathways that shape behavior, decisions, and emotions without the person even noticing. The tragedy is not that people have limiting beliefs, but that they rehearse those beliefs so often that their mind begins treating them as absolute truth. But here's the beautiful part. Repetition works both ways. The same mechanism that creates limitation can create liberation. The same mental loop that reinforces scarcity can reinforce abundance. The same repetition that builds insecurity can build confidence, intelligence, and prosperity. When you intentionally repeat mental patterns that align with your highest self, thoughts of clarity, capability, resilience, creativity, and wealth, you begin reprogramming the neural circuits of your brain. Suddenly, what once felt difficult begins to feel natural. What once felt unfamiliar becomes instinctive. What once felt impossible becomes a normal part of your identity. Think about high performers in any field: athletes, musicians, CEOs, innovators. They all rely on repetition, but not the unconscious kind that reinforces fear. They practice with intention, with awareness, with purpose. Kobe Bryant didn't become extraordinary because he shot a basketball once. He became extraordinary because he repeated the action thousands of times with obsessive precision. The frequency shaped his neurology, the neurology shaped his performance, and the performance shaped his destiny. The same principle applies to your mind. Whatever you rehearse consistently becomes who you are. The wealthiest individuals in the world rely heavily on mental repetition. Take Ray Dalio, founder of Bridgewater Associates. His success was not built only on financial insights, but on mental patterns he repeated relentlessly. Radical clarity, radical honesty, radical focus. Warren Buffett repeats simplicity and patience. Jeff Bezos repeats customer obsession and long-term thinking. These mental loops are not random. They are chosen, reinforced, and installed through years of repetition. Their minds were programmed to think in ways that naturally generate success. They don't have to force those thoughts anymore. The thoughts think themselves. This is where most people underestimate their own potential. They believe intelligence is fixed, that some people are simply born more capable than others. But neuroscience has proven again and again that the brain is constantly rewiring itself through neuroplasticity. Every repeated thought strengthens certain neural circuits and weakens others. Every consistent pattern becomes easier for the brain to reproduce. You literally sculpt the architecture of your mind with your habits of thought. Imagine holding that power in your hands. Imagine knowing that you can shift your mental identity simply by choosing what to rehearse every day. The problem is that most people rehearse fear. They rehearse doubt. They rehearse overwhelm. They rehearse mental narratives of scarcity and struggle. And because repetition makes anything feel normal, they begin to trust those narratives more than their dreams. Their brain becomes a mirror of their fears instead of a generator of their potential. This is why breaking old patterns feels uncomfortable. Not because the new patterns are wrong, but because the old patterns have been rehearsed for so long that they feel familiar, even when they're destructive. To supercharge your brain power, you must reclaim control over your mental repetition. You must choose the thoughts you want your brain to automate. You must decide which beliefs you want to strengthen, which identities you want to reinforce, and which emotional states you want to normalize. When you repeat thoughts of clarity, your brain begins expecting clarity. When you repeat thoughts of abundance, your brain begins recognizing opportunities for abundance. When you repeatedly affirm your intelligence, your brain begins strengthening cognitive circuits that support learning, memory, and problem-solving. The mind does not resist repetition, it obeys it. Imagine waking up every morning and intentionally repeating thoughts that align with your highest potential. Imagine reinforcing the identity of someone who learns easily, adapts quickly, thinks strategically, and attracts success naturally. Imagine training your brain to believe that prosperity is not a distant dream, but a natural expression of who you are. The more you repeat these inner messages, the more your brain reshapes itself around them. Eventually, they stop feeling like affirmations and start feeling like truth. And once your brain accepts something as truth, it begins reorganizing your reality to match it. This is why so many millionaires talk about affirmations, visualization, daily mindset rituals, and clarity exercises. These are not spiritual cliches or motivational tricks. They are tools for neural reprogramming. They are repetition systems that teach the brain what identity to automate. When you rehearse the identity of a successful, intelligent, disciplined, and abundant person, your mind begins operating from that identity even when you're not consciously thinking about it. Repetition is the gateway to transformation. It is how you break mental limitations. It is how you rebuild self-belief. It is how you activate the deeper potential within your brain. You don't need perfect circumstances. You need consistent mental rehearsal. You don't need more intelligence. You need better repetition. You don't need new skills first. You need a new identity that your brain can begin to reinforce until it becomes effortless. Your brain is listening to everything you repeat. Make sure it's learning the truth of who you are becoming, not the fear of who you used to be. Topic 4. The energy of your environment. How your brain absorbs success or failure. There is a truth about the human brain that most people never fully understand. Your environment is programming you even when you're not paying attention. Every conversation you hear, every place you spend time in, every emotion someone else expresses near you, every belief you witness being reinforced, all of it is shaping the chemistry of your mind. Your brain is a social organ. It adapts, it absorbs, it synchronizes. And without realizing it, you become a reflection of the environments you engage with most often. If you want to supercharge your brain power, you must understand this invisible force that is influencing you every day, in every moment, in ways far deeper than motivation or willpower can compete with. Think about this. Your brain is constantly scanning the world for patterns. It watches how people behave. It listens to their tone. It notices their energy. It senses their fears and ambitions. Over time, it begins to normalize whatever it observes. If you spend time around people who complain, your brain begins to adopt their emotional rhythm. If you're around people who constantly talk about how hard life is, your mind begins to register struggle as the default state of reality. If you surround yourself with individuals who don't dream, who settle, who avoid growth, your brain begins lowering its own expectations to match the environment. This happens because of a powerful neurological mechanism known as social conditioning. The brain is wired for connection, and connection requires similarity. So your mind begins adjusting your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors to mirror the group around you. This is why people often lose their ambition when surrounded by small thinkers. It's why intelligent individuals begin doubting themselves when spending time with those who criticize everything. It's why creativity dies in environments where fear and scarcity dominate the emotional landscape. But there is a flip side, and it is extraordinary. When you place yourself in environments where excellence is normal, your brain begins reprogramming itself toward excellence. When you surround yourself with ambition, innovation, and high-level thinking, your mind begins elevating its own standards. When you step into spaces where success is expected rather than doubted, you feel a shift inside your consciousness. Your energy rises, your clarity sharpens, your confidence strengthens. You begin to see yourself differently because you are witnessing new patterns of possibility. Look at companies that shaped the modern world: Google, Apple, Tesla, Amazon. These environments weren't just workplaces, they were psychological incubators. They were built to reinforce curiosity, problem-solving, risk-taking, and visionary thinking. When people stepped inside those ecosystems, their minds accelerated. They thought faster. They created more. They took bolder risks. They questioned limits. The environment lifted them. The energy around them shaped their identity. They weren't simply working for a company. They were thinking inside a powerful cognitive field. The same happens on an individual level. Think of how many millionaires credit mentors, masterminds, or networks as the turning point in their journey. It wasn't the strategy alone. It was the proximity to people who thought differently, people who saw opportunities everywhere, people who didn't collapse under pressure, people who used their brain at a higher level. Their mental frequency was contagious, and it activated something inside those around them. Just by being in the presence of those who operate with clarity and vision, your brain begins elevating itself. This is why your environment is not neutral. It is either feeding your potential or draining your power. It is either sharpening your mind or dulling it. It is either expanding your identity or shrinking it. And most people underestimate this influence because they believe they can think independently of their surroundings. But neuroscience tells a different story. Your brain is constantly syncing with the emotions, behaviors, and belief systems of the people closest to you. If you're in an environment of doubt, your brain begins expecting failure. If you're in an environment of abundance, your brain begins expecting success. One of the most profound things you can do for your brain is to put it in environments where higher-level thinking is normal. Places where people speak about possibilities instead of problems. Places where success stories are shared more often than excuses. Places where people reinforce intelligence, discipline, creativity, and resilience. When your brain sees these qualities as everyday behavior, it rewires itself to match them. And here's where the true transformation begins. Once your brain adjusts to a new environment, it becomes uncomfortable returning to environments that contradict that higher identity. The conversations that once felt normal begin to feel small. The negativity you once tolerated becomes intolerable. The excuses that once felt reasonable begin to sound hollow. Your brain starts rejecting anything that doesn't match your elevated identity. This is when you know the inner shift is real. There is a concept known as cognitive resonance, the idea that your mind thrives in environments that match the frequency of the identity you are stepping into. When you begin your journey of success and transformation, your internal identity may be rising while your external environment stays the same. This causes friction. You feel pulled in two directions. You feel yourself expanding while everything around you remains familiar. This is the point where most people fall back into old patterns, not because they lack motivation, but because the environment pulls them back into who they used to be. But if you persist, if you intentionally place yourself in spaces that support your new identity, your brain makes the leap. It stops seeking comfort and begins seeking elevation. It begins craving environments that challenge you, inspire you, and activate your highest levels of intelligence. Your energy becomes more selective. Your attention becomes sharper. Your heart becomes clearer. You no longer tolerate environments that dim your potential because your brain now recognizes the difference between what drains you and what strengthens you. And that is the essence of this technique. Your environment is shaping your brain every second of your life. If you want to think like someone destined for extraordinary success, you must place your mind in environments that reinforce extraordinary thinking. You must surround yourself with people who stretch your imagination, who elevate your standards, who challenge you to grow instead of settling. When your brain absorbs that kind of energy repeatedly, it begins rewriting your destiny from the inside out. Your mind is learning from your environment whether you like it or not. So choose environments that teach it to rise. Topic 5. The Biological Reset. How rest, stillness, and silence supercharge your brain power. One of the most misunderstood secrets of brain power is that your mind doesn't become stronger only through effort. It becomes stronger through restoration, through silence, through stillness, through moments where the mind is not being pulled, not being demanded, not being overwhelmed by noise or stimulation. In a world where everyone is running, pushing, grinding, chasing productivity, the most powerful cognitive advantage you can give yourself is the ability to pause. Not to escape life, but to reset your internal operating system so it can perform at levels most people never reach. The human brain is not designed to operate at full intensity without intervals of recovery. Just like a muscle needs rest to grow, the mind needs stillness to reorganize itself. The moments you stop are the moments your brain begins repairing neural pathways, clearing mental residue, integrating information, and reorganizing thoughts into patterns that give you clarity and insight. But society praises constant motion, and because of that, people are slowly destroying the very cognitive abilities they're trying to enhance. They confuse exhaustion with productivity. They confuse burnout with discipline. They confuse noise with progress. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in history happen not during intense action, but during moments of stillness. Einstein didn't discover the theory of relativity in a chaotic environment. He discovered it while daydreaming, allowing his mind to drift into silence where deeper patterns could emerge. Nikola Tesla often spent long hours sitting quietly, visualizing machines in his mind with absolute clarity, letting inspiration rise from silence rather than force. Modern billionaires do the same. Bill Gates famously isolates himself for Think Weeks, where he removes distractions entirely so his brain can reboot. The world sees the results, but few understand that those results were born in silence. Your brain has a powerful system called the default mode network. It activates when you are not actively focused on tasks, when you allow yourself to relax, wander, breathe, and let your mind drift. This network is responsible for creativity, problem-solving, memory consolidation, emotional regulation, and deep insights that feel almost spiritual in nature. Yet most people never activate it because they never give their brains silence. They fill every free second with noise, scrolling, notifications, conversations, entertainment, constant stimulation, and then wonder why they feel mentally exhausted, creatively blocked, and emotionally scattered. Stillness is not passive. It is one of the most active forms of healing the brain can experience. When you enter stillness, your brain begins flushing out accumulated stress hormones. Your neurotransmitters rebalance. Your nervous system shifts from survival mode into clarity mode. And in that shift, you begin feeling something most people haven't felt in years: mental spaciousness, that feeling of breathing inside your own mind again, that return to clarity, where you can finally hear your own thoughts without interruption. Rest is not laziness. Rest is strategy. The wealthiest, most successful, most intelligent individuals on the planet understand this deeply. They do not glorify exhaustion. They do not pursue burnout as a badge of honor. They protect their brain's recovery cycles with the same intensity that athletes protect their muscles. They know their best decisions, their clearest insights, their strongest innovations come not from a tired mind, but from a rested one. They treat rest as part of their success plan, not something they allow only after collapsing. You cannot think clearly when your brain is overloaded. You cannot make powerful decisions when your mind is running on emotional residue. You cannot access genius-level creativity when your thoughts are tangled in fatigue. And you cannot elevate your identity when your nervous system is stuck in constant activation. This is why silence is transformative. In silence, the brain reorganizes your identity. It gives you space to sense who you really are and what you truly want. It separates your voice from the world's voice. It strengthens your intuition. It wakes up your inner guidance system. But stillness feels uncomfortable for many people. They fear the quiet because they're not used to hearing themselves. They fill the silence because the silence reveals truths they've avoided. They avoid slowing down because they think slowing down makes them fall behind, not realizing that operating from exhaustion makes them fall further behind than anything else. Silence requires vulnerability. It requires presence. It requires a willingness to face your thoughts rather than drown them with stimulation. And yet, it is in that very vulnerability that transformation begins. When you give your brain time to reset, something extraordinary happens. Problems that once felt overwhelming suddenly seem solvable. Emotional tension you've held for years begins to dissolve. Ideas emerge that feel almost divinely inspired. You begin to see connections between things that previously felt unrelated. Your mind feels lighter, faster, more expansive. You begin thinking like someone who has access to higher intelligence, because you do. The intelligence was always there. It was simply buried under the noise. Rest is not about doing nothing. It is about doing the one thing your brain needs most, integrating who you are becoming. Every time you learn something new, every time you stretch your identity, every time you expand your vision, your brain requires a reset period to organize the new information into your sense of self. If you don't give it rest, the new identity never fully integrates. This is why so many people start personal development journeys but never experience transformation. They absorb information, but they never allow the mental reset required to install it. Imagine what your life would look like if you created consistent moments of silence. Imagine waking up each day with clarity instead of chaos. Imagine thinking from a calm mind instead of an overstimulated one. Imagine feeling inspired not because you are chasing motivation, but because your brain is naturally generating insight. Imagine having access to deeper levels of intelligence simply because you allowed your mind to breathe. Stillness is not an escape from success, it is the foundation of it. It is where your brain regains its strength, restores its power, and reconnects to your highest identity. When you learn to honor silence, you activate genius. When you learn to rest with intention, you amplify your brain power. And when you allow your mind to reset, you prepare yourself to rise into the next level of your potential. Your brain needs space to grow. Give it that space, and it will reward you with clarity, creativity, intelligence, and insight beyond anything you've imagined. Topic 6. The science of emotional alignment. When your feelings become fuel for genius-level thinking. There is a secret about the human mind that almost no one is taught, yet it shapes every decision you make, every idea you have, every limit you break, and every future you create. Your emotions are not distractions. They are not weaknesses. They are not obstacles that you must silence to become intelligent, productive, or successful. Your emotions are energy signals that instruct your brain on how much power it is allowed to access. When you understand this, you begin to see that emotional alignment is not just about inner peace. It is about unlocking higher cognitive performance, mental clarity, creativity, memory, intuition, and the ability to think at a level that feels almost superhuman. The problem is that most people live in emotional contradiction. Their goals point in one direction, while their emotional energy pulls them in another. They want success, but they feel afraid. They want abundance, but they feel scarcity. They want clarity, but they feel overwhelmed. They want progress, but they feel heavy with self-doubt. And this internal misalignment forces the brain into a state of cognitive dissonance, where emotional energy and intention clash. When this happens, the brain cannot fully activate. It shuts down creativity. It blocks strategic thinking. It reduces problem-solving ability. It narrows your perception until all you can see are limitations. Think of a day when you woke up inspired, maybe for no clear reason at all. Your mind felt alive. Thoughts flowed easily. You felt capable, confident, unstoppable. On that day, you could accomplish in hours what might take you days during a period of stress. That is emotional alignment in action. Your emotions and your desires were moving in the same direction, giving your brain access to a higher level of functioning. Now, compare that with the days when you felt anxious, tired, or frustrated. Even simple tasks felt heavy. Ideas felt blocked. Decisions felt confusing. The world looked harder than it actually was. The external world didn't change, but your emotional alignment did, and with it, your access to brain power. This is why the greatest innovators in the world protect their emotional state fiercely. They know inspiration is not a random luxury. It is a cognitive amplifier. They know stress is not just unpleasant. It is a neurological shutdown. Steve Jobs was famous for stepping away when he didn't feel emotionally aligned because he knew genius never comes from tension. Elon Musk relies on emotional regulation techniques during extremely high-pressure moments because he understands that stress narrows thinking. Jeff Bezos built Amazon's culture around calm, long-term thinking because he knew that anxiety destroys innovation. Emotional alignment is not soft. It is strategic. It is the foundation of high-level mental performance. Your brain is always operating in one of two modes, survival or creation. In survival mode, triggered by fear, worry, doubt, or stress, your brain restricts cognitive energy. It prioritizes your immediate safety over your long-term vision. It shuts down intuition and creativity. It blocks high-level reasoning. It prepares you to react instead of innovate. In creation mode, activated by emotions like inspiration, passion, gratitude, confidence, and curiosity, your brain releases powerful neurochemicals that expand your mental capacity. Suddenly, you can see patterns that were invisible, generate ideas effortlessly, and solve problems with clarity that seems to come from somewhere beyond your conscious mind. The key to unlocking creation mode is emotional alignment, getting your feelings and your intentions moving in the same direction. If you want abundance, but feel fear every time you think about money, your brain treats your goal as a threat rather than an opportunity. If you want success but feel unworthy, your brain blocks the very actions that would lead you forward. But if you want abundance and you cultivate emotions of expansion, possibility, gratitude, and capability, your brain begins scanning the world for opportunities rather than dangers. If you want success and you feel aligned with confidence and clarity, your brain enhances your strategic thinking and decision-making. Emotion shapes perception. Perception shapes reality. The most powerful version of you is the one who feels the emotions of your future before it arrives. When you feel abundance ahead of time, your brain strengthens circuits associated with confidence and opportunity. When you feel clarity ahead of time, your brain begins organizing thoughts more efficiently. When you feel gratitude for the future you're building, your brain reduces stress signals and increases cognitive flexibility. Neuroscience confirms this. High-frequency emotions like inspiration, gratitude, joy, and passion increase the brain's coherence. Low-frequency emotions like fear, shame, anger, and doubt create incoherence. A coherent brain thinks better. It sees more. It performs at a higher level. Look at Oprah. Her emotional alignment became her superpower. She learned to generate emotional clarity in situations where others collapsed. She practiced grounding herself emotionally before making decisions. Her success came not just from intelligence, but from emotional coherence. Look at Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx. She repeatedly talks about how she shifted her emotional relationship with failure. Instead of fearing it, she aligned with curiosity, and that alignment became the foundation of her billion-dollar idea. People admire their results, but their results came from emotional mastery long before the world saw their achievements. Your emotions are not random, they are programmable. And the moment you understand that, your entire life changes. You no longer wait to feel ready. You learn to generate the emotional state that activates your highest intelligence. You no longer collapse under stress. You recognize it as a signal that your brain is shifting into survival mode, and you consciously redirect your emotional energy. You no longer allow fear to dictate your actions. You begin to use it as data rather than an identity. Emotional alignment teaches you to be the leader of your inner world, not the prisoner of it. Imagine waking up each day and intentionally calibrating your emotional frequency to match the life you're building. Imagine walking into challenges with a sense of grounded confidence rather than panic. Imagine thinking from clarity rather than confusion. Imagine feeling abundant before the money arrives, confident before the opportunity appears, worthy before the success manifests. This is not pretending. This is not delusion. This is neuro-reprogramming. This is training your brain to operate from your future identity rather than your past struggles. When your emotions align with your intentions, your brain shifts into its highest mode of operation. It becomes faster, clearer, stronger, more intuitive, more creative, and infinitely more capable of building the life you desire. Emotional alignment is the gateway to genius. It is the key to unlocking the full power of your mind. And once you learn to master it, your inner world becomes your greatest source of strength, and your outer world begins transforming to match the intelligence and clarity you now carry within. Topic 7. The power of microhabits. How small daily actions rewire your brain for massive success. There is a myth that success comes from giant leaps, dramatic changes, bold moves, or sudden strokes of genius. But the brain doesn't work that way. Your mind is shaped not by occasional bursts of effort, but by the tiny, repeated actions you perform every single day. These micro-habits, almost invisible in the moment, are constantly sculpting your identity, your neural pathways, your emotional patterns, your motivation levels, and your internal sense of what is possible for you. If you want to supercharge your brain power, you must understand that the smallest behaviors often create the largest transformations. The human brain thrives on consistency. Every time you repeat an action, no matter how small, the brain strengthens the neural circuit associated with that action. Over time, those circuits become automatic, and what once felt difficult becomes effortless. This is how habits are formed, not by willpower, but by repetition. And the extraordinary thing is that micro-habits bypass resistance. Because they are small, they don't trigger fear, overwhelm, or procrastination. They slip beneath the radar of doubt and plant seeds of transformation quietly, steadily, powerfully. Most people underestimate micro-habits because they seem too simple. They believe life changes through big decisions, dramatic strategies, or sudden clarity. But transformation rarely comes in a single moment. It comes through the accumulation of tiny choices that slowly reprogram your brain into a new identity. A person who reads for 5 minutes every morning becomes someone whose mind hungers for knowledge. A person who writes one sentence a day becomes someone whose brain starts seeing stories everywhere. A person who practices gratitude for 30 seconds each night becomes someone who naturally scans the world for abundance. The micro-habit becomes the identity, and the identity creates the destiny. Think about how millionaires build their success. People imagine them, they see the big decisions. Launching companies, investing in opportunities, creating innovations that shape the world. But behind those big decisions were thousands of tiny habits repeated daily. Warren Buffett reads obsessively, not because he forces himself to, but because the micro-habit of consuming information became as natural to him as breathing. Elon Musk didn't develop his problem-solving abilities overnight. He trained his brain through constant micro-habits of curiosity, exploration, questioning, reading, experimenting, imagining. Over time, those small repetitions created a mind capable of thinking at a level most people never reach. Micro-habits work because they align with how the brain evolves. The brain is a machine of adaptation. It constantly adjusts itself based on what you do repeatedly. If you repeatedly avoid challenges, the brain wires itself for avoidance. If you repeatedly choose comfort, the brain wires itself for passivity. If you repeatedly focus on fear, the brain wires itself for hesitation. But if you repeatedly take small steps toward growth, expansion, clarity, and confidence, the brain wires itself for success. It becomes easier to think clearly, easier to act decisively, easier to stay focused, easier to feel motivated. You become someone for whom progress is natural. The power of micro-habits also lies in momentum. Once the brain gets used to small victories, it begins craving more. Completing a simple habit releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with motivation and reward. The more dopamine your brain releases, the more motivated you feel to continue. This is how people who once felt stuck suddenly find themselves unstoppable. It wasn't magic, it was chemistry. It was the brain responding to tiny actions that created a chain reaction of motivation. A single step can activate the entire system. People often fall into the trap of believing they need to overhaul their entire life to change it. They try to fix everything at once. They push themselves into unrealistic routines. They set extreme goals that trigger anxiety instead of excitement. And within a week, they give up. Not because they are lazy, but because their brain was overwhelmed. Micro-habits solve this. They meet the brain where it is. They allow transformation to happen slowly enough that it doesn't trigger fear, yet consistently enough that results become inevitable. Think of a person who wants to improve their mental clarity. Instead of forcing themselves into an intense routine they cannot sustain, they begin with one micro-habit: 5 minutes of silent breathing each morning. At first, it feels insignificant, but after a week, the brain starts noticing the benefits. After a month, the mind becomes quieter. After 3 months, focus improves. After 6 months, clarity becomes a natural state. The person didn't force a new life. They allowed their brain to evolve into it. And once the brain evolves, staying at a higher level becomes effortless. The same principle applies to abundance. If every day you practice noticing one thing that proves abundance exists in your life, one moment of opportunity, one feeling of gratitude, one sign of expansion, your brain begins rewiring itself to perceive abundance more often. Slowly, scarcity loses its grip. Slowly, your emotional alignment shifts. Slowly, your confidence rises. The micro-habit becomes the bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. And eventually, you wake up one day realizing your entire internal world has changed without the need for dramatic struggle. Micro-habits also rewire your identity. Your identity is not who you are. It is who you repeatedly believe yourself to be. Every micro-habit becomes a vote for your future self. The person who writes daily becomes a writer. The person who trains daily becomes an athlete. The person who studies daily becomes a student of life. The person who chooses discipline daily becomes someone who trusts themselves. And this is the real power of micro-habits. They rebuild the relationship you have with yourself. They teach your brain, through repetition, that you are someone who follows through, someone who grows, someone who improves, someone who rises. Imagine how your life would transform. if you committed to a single micro-habit aligned with your highest identity. Imagine focusing on tiny actions that slowly recalibrate your mind toward abundance, clarity, intelligence, discipline, or confidence. Imagine giving your brain the consistent cues it needs to evolve. You don't need to force greatness. You need to feed it daily in small doses. Over time, the micro-habit becomes a mindset. The mindset becomes a personality. The personality becomes a destiny. Your brain is always listening. It's always learning. It's always rewiring itself based on what you do repeatedly. And if you choose your micro-habits with intention, your mind will rise to meet the future you are cultivating, one small action at a time. Topic 8. The art of mental visualization. How seeing your future rewires your brain to create it. If you truly want to unlock the highest levels of brain power, you must understand a secret that the world's most successful people have used quietly for decades. The brain cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. When you visualize something with enough emotional intensity and sensory detail, your brain fires the same neural circuits it would fire if the event were actually happening. This is not fantasy. This is neuroscience. This is neuroplasticity in action, the brain reshaping itself based on imagination, preparing you for a future it has not yet lived but is already rehearsing internally. Visualization is not daydreaming. It is mental programming. It is the art of teaching your brain to believe in your future before it arrives. Athletes have known this for years. Before Michael Jordan stepped onto the court, he had already played the entire game in his mind. Before a diver launches into the air, they have already executed the perfect dive mentally dozens of times. Before a gymnast flips across the floor, they have rehearsed the movements in their imagination until their brain accepted the routine as familiar. The victories did not begin in the arena. They began in the mind, where the brain was trained to perform flawlessly. Visualization created the neural blueprint, and the body followed. But the power of mental visualization extends far beyond athletes. It is a tool used by CEOs, inventors, artists, entrepreneurs, and wealth builders. Walt Disney famously said he saw Disneyland completed in his mind long before a single blueprint existed. Jim Carrey wrote himself a check for $10 million and visualized cashing it every day until the world aligned with his inner reality. Oprah speaks frequently about how she visualized her life long before she achieved it, using mental imagery to align her emotions, intentions, and decisions with the future she felt destined to create. These individuals weren't guessing. They understood something powerful. If you can hold the vision long enough, your brain begins building the pathways to make it real. Visualization works because it triggers the same neural networks involved in memory, emotion, decision-making, and future planning. When you imagine your future with clarity, your brain forms new connections that make the desired outcome feel familiar. And when something feels familiar, your brain stops resisting it. Fear fades, doubt loses its power, uncertainty becomes excitement. Your mind begins treating your vision not as a possibility, but as an expectation. And expectations are powerful forces. The brain naturally moves toward whatever it expects. Imagine two people with the same goals but different internal imagery. One visualizes success vividly, the feeling of achieving their dream, the environment they're in, the energy of the moment, the identity they become. The other person focuses only on effort and struggle. Even if they work equally hard, the first person will achieve more. Why? Because their brain is rehearsing the future they desire, while the other is rehearsing resistance. One is moving toward their vision. The other is unconsciously moving away from it. Visualization shifts the internal compass of the mind. It points the brain toward expansion instead of fear. The emotional component of visualization is equally powerful. The brain responds to emotion far more strongly than logic. When you visualize with passion, gratitude, excitement, confidence, and certainty, the emotional energy enhances the neural imprint. You are not just thinking your future, you are feeling it. You are embodying it. And emotion mixed with imagination becomes a magnetic force that changes the way you think, act, and perceive the world. This emotional alignment communicates to your brain, "This is who I am now." Once that identity settles in, your behaviors naturally shift to match it. Think of a person who struggles with self-worth and tries to build a successful future without changing their internal imagery. their brain still sees them as someone who fails, hesitates, or feels undeserving. No matter how hard they try to change their behavior, their brain is pulling them back to the old identity. But if that same person begins visualizing themselves as strong, successful, capable, respected, wealthy, and confident, and does so consistently enough, the neural pathways shift. The brain begins rewriting the identity, and once the identity changes, the external world follows. Visualization also activates the reticular activating system, a powerful filtering mechanism that shapes your perception of reality. When you consistently imagine your future, the RAS begins noticing anything in your environment that matches your vision. Opportunities that once seemed invisible suddenly appear. People who can help you begin entering your life. Ideas begin flowing more easily. Your intuition becomes sharper. You become more aware, more receptive, and more capable of recognizing the paths that lead toward your desired future. The brain is no longer operating blind. It has a target. This is why visualization practice daily can feel like magic. You begin experiencing coincidences, synchronicities, chance meetings, unexpected breakthroughs, but none of it is random. Your brain is aligning your perception with your vision, and your perception is shaping your actions, your responses, your energy, and your results. When you see the future clearly enough, your life starts rearranging itself to meet the vision. Visualization also breaks the limits of your past. Many people are trapped by the memories of who they used to be, their mistakes, their failures, their insecurities. But visualization allows you to build a new reference point, a new mental home, a new identity blueprint that is not defined by your past, but designed by your future. You stop living from old memories and begin living from new possibilities. And when the brain has a new image to follow, the old ones lose their power. Imagine yourself stepping into the highest version of who you can be. Imagine walking into rooms with confidence. Imagine your mind thinking clearly, your creativity flowing naturally, your decisions aligning with your purpose. Imagine seeing yourself succeeding at the level you secretly desire, but seldom admit. The more you rehearse that version of yourself, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, it feels less like imagination and more like truth. And once it becomes truth in your brain, your external world begins matching it. Visualization is the art of turning the unseen into something the brain can touch. It is the bridge between imagination and reality. It is the inner rehearsal that prepares your mind to rise into its highest potential. When you visualize your future with clarity and emotion, you are not escaping your life. You are designing it. You are giving your brain a blueprint to follow. You are telling the universe, "This is where I am going." And the moment you decide that, your mind begins clearing the path. Topic 9. The power of purpose. How a clear why ignites limitless brain potential. There is a force inside every human being capable of awakening extraordinary levels of intelligence, resilience, creativity, and mental endurance. A force so powerful that it can turn ordinary individuals into visionaries, innovators, and leaders who reshape industries, impact millions, and build lives of extraordinary meaning. That force is purpose. A clear why. A reason that lives deeper than motivation, deeper than ambition, deeper than desire. Purpose is the emotional and neurological engine that supercharges the brain, aligns your identity, sharpens your focus, and pulls you toward your highest potential with a strength that discipline alone can never match. Purpose is not something you find, it is something you awaken. It emerges when you become brutally honest about what matters to you, what drives you, what calls you, and what refuses to stay quiet inside your chest. Purpose is that internal whisper that says, "You were made for more." It is the quiet intuition that nudges you toward a vision even when you cannot see the full path. It is the sense of inner truth that lights up your brain when you imagine a future where you are fully alive, fully expressed, fully in alignment with who you were always meant to be. The brain responds to purpose in profound ways. Neuroscientists have discovered that when a person engages in activities linked to a strong internal purpose, the brain releases neurochemicals associated with focus, emotional stability, and long-term motivation. The prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for planning, decision-making, and problem-solving, becomes more active and efficient. The limbic system, which regulates emotion, becomes more balanced. The default mode network, associated with creativity and meaning, lights up. Purpose creates coherence in the brain. It synchronizes different neural regions into a unified state, allowing you to think better, feel stronger, and act with clarity that others cannot understand. When you have a clear why, obstacles no longer feel like threats. They feel like challenges. They become part of the mission. Your brain interprets difficulty as meaningful effort rather than suffering. This shift is monumental. It is the difference between burnout and resilience. It is the difference between quitting and rising. A person without purpose collapses under pressure because their brain cannot justify the struggle. But a person with purpose becomes unstoppable because every step forward is tied to meaning. Think about the individuals who change the world. Steve Jobs once said, "People with passion can change the world for the better." And he wasn't talking about temporary excitement. He meant a deep internal purpose that fueled relentless innovation even through failure, rejection, and doubt. Elon Musk risked everything repeatedly because his purpose was bigger than comfort. Oprah built an empire founded on helping others awaken to their highest selves. Sarah Blakely transformed an idea into a billion-dollar company because her purpose was rooted in empowering women. Their success was not born from strategies alone. It was born from purpose that activated their minds at a level that average goals could never reach. Purpose sharpens focus like nothing else. When you know why you're doing something, distractions lose their power. The brain stops chasing noise and begins filtering reality through the lens of your mission. Suddenly, you see opportunities instead of obstacles, solutions instead of problems, pathways instead of dead ends. Your nervous system stabilizes because clarity calms the mind. Your emotional energy rises because purpose energizes the soul. You make decisions faster because your internal compass is aligned. You experience less doubt because your identity is anchored in something meaningful. One of the most transformative effects of purpose is how it restructures your self-image. When you attach your identity to a purpose, you stop seeing yourself through the lens of your past and begin seeing yourself through the lens of your potential. You no longer measure yourself by your mistakes or limitations. You measure yourself by your mission. And when your brain internalizes that identity, everything changes. You walk differently, you speak differently, you think differently. You stop asking, "What if I fail?" and begin asking, "What if this works? What if this is what I was made for?" Purpose also strengthens emotional resilience. When your why is powerful, your tolerance for discomfort increases. You stop giving up when things get difficult because your brain interprets the struggle as meaningful. Stress becomes fuel, fear becomes data, uncertainty becomes part of the journey rather than a barrier. This is why people with purpose can endure hardships that would break others. Their brains are wired differently. Their emotional energy is aligned. Their inner fire is stronger than external challenges. But perhaps the most beautiful thing about purpose is that it expands your consciousness. It makes you think beyond yourself. It makes you consider the impact you want to have on the world, the legacy you want to leave, the people you want to uplift. Purpose transforms intelligence into service, ambition into contribution, talent into influence. It awakens a higher level of brain function, one rooted not just in personal gain but in contribution, connection, and meaning. And when your cognitive power merges with meaning, you step into a level of genius that cannot be taught, only activated. Imagine your life fueled by a purpose so clear that every day feels like a step towards something meaningful. Imagine waking up with a sense of direction, moving through life with intention, making decisions with clarity, and acting with confidence. Imagine the energy that would flow through your mind if everything you did connected to a deeper mission. Your brain would operate at a higher level. Your creativity would expand. Your resilience would grow. Your confidence would strengthen. You would no longer drift, you would drive. Purpose is the ignition switch of the mind. It is the inner flame that turns ordinary cognition into extraordinary intelligence, ordinary effort into extraordinary performance, ordinary goals into extraordinary destinies. When you know your why, your brain becomes limitless. It aligns, it activates, it rises, and when your brain rises, your entire life follows. Topic 10. The awakening of your limitless mind, claiming the future your brain was designed for. There is a moment in every journey when the knowledge you've gathered stops being information and becomes transformation. A moment when the brain shifts, the heart opens, the identity expands, and you realize that everything you've been searching for, clarity, focus, intelligence, discipline, confidence, creativity, abundance, was never outside of you. It was inside you all along, waiting for activation. This final step is not about learning something new. It is about awakening what has always been there. Your brain is a masterpiece of potential, capable of levels of power that most people will never access simply because they never claim it. But now, after every technique you've learned in this journey, you stand at the threshold of a new identity. The identity of someone who no longer operates from limitation, but from possibility. When you look back at everything your mind has absorbed, the power of decisive identity, the mastery of focus, the reprogramming through repetition, the influence of environment, the biological reset of stillness, the alignment of emotion, the momentum of micro-habits, the force of visualization, and the ignition of purpose, you begin to see a pattern. These are not random techniques. They are parts of a single blueprint. A blueprint not only for supercharging your brain, but for activating a new level of consciousness where you become the architect of your life rather than a passive observer. Your brain is not just a thinking machine, it is a creator. And when you treat it as such, you rise into a version of yourself that no longer reacts to life, but designs it. There is something powerful that happens when the brain finally understands what it is capable of. The old mental barriers, fear, doubt, hesitation, confusion, scarcity, begin to lose their grip. They don't disappear instantly, but they weaken, like shadows fading in the presence of growing light. The reason these barriers lose power is simple. The brain can no longer pretend that you are small. It can no longer pretend that you are powerless. It can no longer pretend that you are limited. Once you awaken the awareness of your potential, your brain must adapt to that truth. And when the brain adapts, your entire reality begins shifting. Think of what happens inside you when you finally see yourself clearly. Not through the lens of past mistakes, not through the lens of fear, but through the lens of possibility. Your posture changes, your inner voice changes, your decisions change, your energy changes, your expectations change. You begin to think like someone who belongs to a bigger life. You begin to act like someone who expects success rather than fears failure. You begin to speak like someone whose words carry intention rather than hesitation. This shift is subtle at first, but with time it becomes undeniable. Your identity evolves. You begin to embody a new mental frequency. This final transformation is not about effort. It is about alignment. When your mind, emotions, habits, environment, purpose, and identity align, you enter a mental state where progress feels natural rather than forced. You feel guided rather than lost. You feel inspired rather than pressured. You begin attracting opportunities that match your new level of thinking. Your brain begins noticing what it once ignored. Your intuition strengthens, your creativity deepens, and your sense of timing becomes more accurate. Everything feels connected. Everything feels meaningful. Everything feels like it's happening for you rather than to you. The truth is, most people never reach this level because they never slow down long enough to see who they can become. They get caught in cycles of survival, routines of distraction, patterns of fear, and environments that limit them. Their brain becomes exhausted, overwhelmed, and underutilized. They live reactive lives instead of intentional ones. But you are not most people. You chose to learn. You chose to grow. You chose to step into a deeper understanding of your mind. That choice alone separates you from millions who will never tap into even a fraction of their potential. Imagine what becomes possible for you now. Imagine moving through life with a brain that is focused, aligned, emotionally balanced, habitually disciplined, creatively charged, purpose-driven, and mentally expansive. Imagine waking up each morning and feeling certainty instead of confusion, clarity instead of fear, excitement instead of hesitation. Imagine a future where your mind is your greatest ally rather than your greatest challenge. A future where your brain works with you, not against you. A future where your thoughts create momentum instead of resistance. This is the awakening, the moment you realize your mind is not something to be controlled, but something to be activated. You are not fighting your brain, you are partnering with it. You are building a relationship with your inner intelligence that will guide you for the rest of your life. And the more you nurture it, the stronger it grows. The more you trust it, the clearer it becomes. The more you challenge it, the more powerful it becomes. Your brain is limitless because you are limitless. The only limits that existed were the ones created by an old identity that no longer belongs to you. As you step into this new chapter, understand that transformation does not depend on perfection. It depends on awareness. The awareness that your thoughts matter. The awareness that your emotions matter. The awareness that your habits matter. The awareness that your inner world shapes your outer world. With this awareness, your every action becomes intentional. Your every decision becomes meaningful. Your every step becomes aligned with a future worthy of you. This is your moment of awakening. The moment you choose to rise into your highest potential. The moment you claim the future your brain was designed for. The moment you stop waiting for permission and realize that your mind is the key to everything you desire. The moment you say, with full conviction, I am ready. Because you are. Every technique, every insight, every shift you've experienced has led you here to a new identity, a new mindset, a new future. Your brain is a miracle. Your potential is real. Your life is yours to design. And starting now, you step into the limitless version of who you were always meant to be. If this message awakened something inside you, if you felt even a single moment of clarity, expansion, or possibility, then don't let this be the end of your journey. Let it be the beginning. Your mind is rising into a new level of power. Honor that. Feed it. Grow it. Protect it. So take a deep breath and claim this moment. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you can continue unlocking the tools, insights, and breakthroughs that will elevate your life. Like this video to tell your brain and the YouTube algorithm that this is the kind of content that strengthens you. Leave a comment sharing the technique that resonated most deeply with you. Your words might inspire someone else to awaken their own potential. And share this video with someone you care about, because you never know whose life might change from hearing the message you heard today. This is the Success and Prosperity Code, and together, we are rewriting the limits of the mind. Your future begins now.